You guys okay with me? I know that was a fast overview of that, but that was some stuff that we talked about the other night that we spent quite a bit of time on.
Looks good to me.
Okay. Now we'll go to the comments. You want to do the public comments tonight, or you want to do them a different night?
How are we doing on schedule?
Well, we're pretty close. What I was gonna actually recommend, because we don't, I would recommend that we should look ahead a little bit and probably try to have maybe like another catch-up meeting between the March 20th, Article 14 meeting and the April, I believe it's April 7th, is the first public hearing, to try to pull things together more so that the document is a little bit more wrapped tight. We have agreement on some of the language.
Fine by me.
Because we're going to get a lot more changes between now and March 20th on the sound issues, and probably get more comment. So we can look at these real quick, and if you want to, we can do them tonight, or we don't have to do them tonight. So, okay, so this one is, the only noise control for wind turbines is distance. Residents should be protected.
Okay.
Hang on a second. On their property, as you get setback should be changed to start at the property lines of non-participating residents. So like the way it stands right now, it would be like 4,000 feet basically.
My response to that was, okay, he said, noise control wind turbines is distance. Okay. This has been discussed by the board extensively in the past. We agree that distance is the primary noise control, but the board disagrees that using property lines is warranted, considering that many properties in Clifton are large and mostly undeveloped land or in tree growth.
Well, typically I've seen some research, well, and I'll let other people spell out what they've said. I've seen different standards for how much sound decibels can be increased as a result of putting in a business in general. And actually, and I hadn't realized it when I saw this a couple days ago, I was trying to figure this out, what's reasonable. On our small wind energy systems, we allow them to be 5 decibels louder than they are before they get started, which would be at the property line. They can increase it. That's all the only sound standard we have is you can't go more than 5 decibels. So if normally it's 40 decibels, at your property line, you can't be 45 decibels at your property line when you're done for a small wind energy system. Okay, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, or like I've seen like in this urban areas when they come and put in a new business, they typically, like I think in New York and down in the kind of the more dressed up areas, in not New York City, but in the more nicer residential areas, or mixed residential areas, they tend to use 6 decibels. If you put in a business, you're going to be louder than 6 decibels, you have to be mitigated somehow or another. So they allow a 6 decibel excursion, so to speak. So we're reducing the sound now from 40 decibels to 35 decibels.
Right, but the thing is, property lines, you're talking, I don't think that if you were in the town, in city, or some other place where you had these little lots, where, okay, a person's got a half-acre lot, yeah, well, actually, with the definition that we're looking at right now, within 100 feet of a sensitive receptor, that's basically 200 feet in each direction. You're talking about an acre right there.
And you're looking at the developer would have 4,000 feet to a property line, you're looking at the developer having to have, if you go out from the radius, close to a mile, he would have to own all the way around.
Unless he can get, it's, I don't think going to property lines, especially when you're talking about the large property sizes in Clifton, is reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, but what sound values are we allowing at property lines typically? I think we're down to around,
Well, it isn't what we're down to, it's a
It's at
case
4,000
of,
feet.
is it reasonable to tell anybody who's putting in any kind of a business, well, you're not gonna be able to operate within 1,000 feet of the side of your property because we're protecting everything on the other guys from property line on.
well, almost any business, like if you, in any business, well, sound is different than like water. Because sound is gonna travel. I mean, whether you get into an argument, with your wife and your kids, or you run your chainsaw, or you put nails on your roof, or you have a carpentry shop, I mean, the sound is gonna go off the property line just by the nature of the physics of the sound. So I don't see how you can not have sound across a property line. I mean, I think not.
Well,
Then the question is how much sound?
What we had always before was, do you protect someone's whole property? Consider their whole property their residence? Or do you consider just their home? Well, most of Clifton has relatively large properties, especially since huge numbers when they were developed originally were done as strips. So you've got people, they've got their 200 feet of frontage, and then they go back 800 feet. They use the front 200 feet of their property, but they own 800 feet.
That's how it was when I lived on my farm. I had a 35-acre farm, and we used like the first, every single day, probably within maybe like 150 to 200 feet of any of our house walls we used.
What's important is protecting residences and anything else that we consider a sensitive receptor. Protecting the woods and what is basically unused land.
I think Bruce's
Under-
explanation is fitting for this.
I mean, we went over this over and over and over again back when we first did.
Is this it?
The two pages.
Okay.
It's on
It's on the second page.
It's on the second page. The short, not the,
Can you?
it's,
This page,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
noise control.
All right. All right, I got it. I'll put it together. All right, do you want to go with that, or you want to add to it?
Okay, you done?
I think it's a good explanation.
Okay. Are these the only questions that are up here, Bruce? Did you go get these off that?
I got it off his pages.
Okay, I just copied it, so I'm not gonna keep going back and forth, because that's hard to read, because it goes up and down.
Yeah.
So, okay, so go back to the first page then. On the issue of ambient sound ISO maps, they are not impossible to create. Here are a couple of examples of ambient maps and excerpts from NPS jobs. Did you guys look at, I looked at them, did you guys look at the NPS jobs?
I may have, I don't know.
This one of them's 88 pages, and one of them is, I forget, 130 or 40 pages.
Yeah,
or
they're
something.
long.
We should talk about this. Are those the
No.
state parks?
The state parks.
National parks.
Yeah, national parks.
Oh, yeah.
One was like 340 square miles.
I looked at both of those.
Okay.
Teton and
Yeah.
Yellowstone.
Yeah, and you see my comments, and
You read it here. Go
you want to
ahead.
read them?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I have to thank the Beckfords for these examples, because it's something I hadn't seen before. But reading the two entire reports and how these maps are created shows exactly why the planning board's decision to not use isocontour maps is a correct decision. And then I've got the name of the long one, it actually is the one for the map that he provided us with for the seashore Park. I forget the name of it. Looking on pages 41 and 42 is where they describe the procedure, pretty much. The process is completely backward. Sounds are not measured and then used to set sound contours. What they do instead, and this is right off of on those pages, they define the acoustic zone boundaries. So someone just looks at a map of the area and they say, well, this all looks the same, it's the same type. So this is zone 1.
Developed area, they had the red type developed
Right.
area.
Then they define the location of a measurement site somewhere in that plot. Then they assign whatever the measured value is at that measurement point to the entire area. There's no measurements over most of it. There's no actual... so they just assigned this to an area that somebody has arbitrarily decided is all one zone. Well, that's not a true isocontour map. That's basically setting the boundaries by somebody just looking at it and then picking a value, which may not even be appropriate, to apply to it. In fact, that map, if you take a look at it, as I wrote here, sound zones are defined first based on sometimes arbitrary criteria, and then an assumed representative measured sound level is assigned to all points in that zone.
This is before we even set up a sound receptor. Nothing's been set up.
Well, no, they do actually measure it at points, but then they assume that every place that we decided is similar.
This is kind of the narrowing it down. See, initially when we were doing the ordinance, all right, before I kind of understood what was going on, I mean, this was like the generalized concept, though, not 13 points per 340 square miles. That was not what I had in my mind. That doesn't seem adequate, even remotely, but nevertheless, my thought process, I kind of thought that the sound situation was much like topographic contours. But the reality, for ground, for elevation contours. But the problem with that thought process is, which is why I was wrong, I didn't realize I was wrong, because if I would have realized I was wrong early enough, I would have never gotten an ordinance, because I would have argued against putting in an ordinance. When you have the sound, like, just pretend that this desktop is the ocean, okay? Well, ground contours are, 0 is the ocean, okay? That is 0 elevation. And then as you come up, like to the top of this knoll here, okay, you're going up, so many feet to the top of the knoll, but 0 is the ocean. And if I'm in Nebraska, or if I'm in Maine, or if I'm in the Grand Canyon, all right, or in Death Valley, 0 is still the ocean. Okay, so my point of origin for the generation of all my contours, up or down, okay, is always the ocean. Okay.
Well, for sound, it's the same way.
But no, it's not the same way.
Well, there is a...
But there's a whole bunch of zeros. But for sound, the issue is, for sound, is you don't measure, when you measure sound, because these contours are all with respect, change in elevation with respect to the ocean. That's where all contours are, okay? But for sound, it's the change in sound with respect to an object. Is this change in sound, like if this pen and this phone drop at the same time, okay, there's a set of contours that come from this, and there's a set of contours that come from this. And if I drop 3 things at the same time and break them, there's a set of contours from all of them at the same time.
Yes, but they are still all reference to there is a 0 dB.
Right, there's 0 dB, but it's coming from 3 different places.
Right, but the thing about this whole way that they did this, which is used as the example, is that they're not actually measuring the sound everywhere and setting contours. They're deciding the contours ahead of time arbitrarily and then assigning a sound value to it.
The whole area, one sound value for the whole area.
Right, in fact, the example shown on that map includes a waterfall and sounds of the ocean, and they've got them at the same sound level as all of the inland areas.
Well,
which
the other
is
thing is,
totally baloney. And on top of that, one measurement point in particular, just on the one for the seashore, it is the largest one. That one point is used and assumed to be the background sound for an area of over 30 square miles. some parts of which are 10 miles distant from the measurement point, if you look at the scales.
Well, then they don't
It's
even take ambient
ridiculous.
sound, they don't even take ambient sound because they don't consider any human sounds.
Well, no, they actually do it for about 6 different ways, and every one of them is fudged though the same way.
Right, well then there's the one at Yellowstone National Park for the snowmobiles.
Right.
Okay, now the one for Yellowstone National Park for the snowmobiles, that one, they actually did the sounds based on they did the sound study for a snowmobile the same way you do a sound study for a wind turbine. They did the sound study based on the sound being generated by each individual snowmobile or each convoy of snowmobiles. Okay?
Right, except
so-
again, what they did do with that the same way is that they didn't actually measure it. They just assumed so many snowmobiles per day are gonna go by that spot and added that value in.
Well, right, but the point of the matter is they used it with the sound was based on the engine, on the generation of sound from the snowmobile. It wasn't an ambient sound model. It was just like a wind turbine. It was just like assuming there'd be 5 wind turbines or 10 wind turbines and you stick it someplace and all of them run or don't run or whatever. It was done the exact same way.
Except
No.
technically, that's the same as a post-construction sound map.
Well, theoretically, right. Well, that's what we're asking for, though.
Well, no, we're
No,
not.
not right. No, I'm agreeing. That's what I'm agreeing for. It's done the same exact way. It's a post-project ISO contour map, which is possible,
Which
but
is possible.
which is not, but it's not based on the ambient sound. So,
But the ambient sound one is pure as baloney. It's the same thing. They took 13 spots over 340 square miles, and one of them, they've got 3 spots in one little tiny area.
but the
If
ambient,
you equivalize it to the project here in town, you'd only need 2 measuring points.
well, we're not even that because it's 340 square miles on 13. So,
Not even 2 maybe.
right. That's what I mean.
So they're not actually doing an ambient ISO contour map. They're simply saying, this whole big area is this, and this whole they did measure, but they're just saying everything here is this value, whether it really is or not. What use is that really?
Right. So that was. It just didn't seem. It didn't meet in my view, a standard for an ISO contour map that would look like a topographic map, which looks like the post-construction map.
It gives you no more actual real information than just looking at the measurement points themselves, which is what we've decided.
Which is what we did.
Yeah, which is what we did.
So it's not, I agree with Dave, that Hessler, it's not possible. So, all right, it's the low frequency, did you want to make any changes to that? I might add a couple comments in about.
Okay, yeah, low frequency noise, I didn't write his whole thing out on it because it was fairly long, I had to
Okay.
type it all in.
Hang on, just to make sure everybody is looking at it. That was that.
That's separate from-
That's a separate.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 issues all under that low frequency.
Oh, okay, all right.
Anyways,
Just deal with it then.
okay. We have downloaded the complete 51-page report, not just the executive summary.
Yeah, I found a link to that.
What is interesting is the data showing turbine sound at our 2 residents, only 1,200 feet from a turbine. And it does definitely show sound of low frequencies at all frequencies. Again, it's only 1,200 feet. Just as interesting is a statement on page 17, and copying it, and there's a lot more data in here, but this is one of the most relevant ones. Figure 6, low frequency spectra and outdoor-indoor cross spectrograph. What it means is they did frequencies, they had a measuring instrument outside and inside. The outside one you would normally think is picking up mostly turbine sound. There's even questions there on some of that. And they said there was a helicopter flyover. And he says, note the Doppler shift of rotor tone from 20.5 hertz on approach to 15 hertz receding. Also note high coherence of the helicopter rotor blade harmonics. What that means is they were measuring peaks of sound at the same time inside as outside. The sound was obviously in the building. Note very low coherence of turbine blade frequencies below 10 Hz, suggesting most of the infrasound is general atmospheric pressure fluctuation and wind forces on the residence. What it means is that at that longer residence where they did take these more detailed readings, wind turbine noise, yes, there was a lot of infrasound in the house, but the evidence that's necessarily from the wind turbines isn't there. And they did say there needs to be a lot more studies on, I mean, if you read the whole thing, we would
Well, it's quite interesting, because if you read through the back of it, it got to a point where it talks about what they hadn't done is what they wanted to do is take a study of inside of a house and have it, you know, a sound recorder, you know, one of the engineers involved, you know, and a proctor to kind of maintain the neutrality of it. What they wanted to do was to have, make sure that the person had to be monitoring their computer the whole time for the data, as a data collector, and they didn't want the person to have visibility of the wind turbine. They wanted to turn the wind turbines off and on, and see if the people in the house could actually detect it over the course of an hour. Obviously, you're not going to notice it necessarily instantaneously, but they wanted to be able to do that. They haven't ever done that, and that seems to be more of...
Well, they want to do some more blind studies. There
Right.
are some individuals who claim to be able to tell when they start and stop, but there has been no double-blind studies to actually verify that. It's purely
Anecdotal. In most cases, people can visually see them and go, yeah, I feel it now.
yeah, that is a problem. There's a lot in that whole study. There is also a whole section that one of the people did showing the sounds that were collected versus similar study of infrasound on the microphones in the desert. Was it in Arizona or New Mexico? I mean, they put it in the middle of a desert. They put a microphone in the middle of the desert and then measured the wind going over the microphone at 1 meter per second, 2 meters, and 3 meters. The 2 meter line exactly tracked the infrasound measured in the house. So how much of it is background?
Right.
And in fact, at this point, it's other than that one house, R2, the close one, where you can actually see these spikes
Right.
matching.
I mean, you would expect that, actually.
You would expect it at 1,200.
Those
feet,
aerial
around
shots, that
1,200
was
feet.
flat ground.
Yeah.
They were farm fields.
Yeah, there's another thing. There's if you have seen the CD from the people in Shirley, there's 5 or 6 or 7, I forget just how many people there are there who have claimed that, you know, they're really badly affected. But there's a lot of houses in the area. As usual, there's a small number of people that definitely have some sort of a problem, but the majority of people don't. A lot of them are close to. It's a good study, and everybody should read most of it, but it's also a lot of work.
Yeah, they're pretty meaty.
Then you get to another part of his low frequency. He mentioned the DVD of
Rick James.
the Windfall trailer, and then again, this is all of these, surely the people who claim that they're badly affected by it. I can't discount that some of them aren't affected. I think they are, especially the ones that are close.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And there is evidence out there now that some people are more sensitive than others, because you had at least one household where the wife claims to be badly affected and the husband.
Doesn't even notice.
So wasn't it Robert Rand who was ill for 3 days after he took the measurements?
Yeah, well, I'm having trouble with Robert Rand because he
He
did.
did the one at 7,000 feet too.
Yeah, he he never had a problem with wind turbines with all of the testing he supposedly did up until he went to Falmouth. And all of a sudden, since then, every place that he goes and does any testing, he gets sick.
And also, though, I think in the article it said that he had
Motion sickness.
motion sickness in general. He has, so he's got probably some.
Well,
you know,
there
medical
is
stuff going
now
on.
a correlation that some people are claiming. Even that Nina Pierpont has backed off on a lot of her claims, but she does claim now that this type of nausea and things is associated with people who are subject to motion sickness. So somebody may have think there may actually be a correlation between people subject to motion sickness and being more sensitive to whatever it is. The second one, the CD of Rick James interview.
I thought that at first was something he accidentally slipped in there, because isn't there a musician?
Was.
Well, Rick James is one of the primary acousticians, if I'm pronouncing it.
No.
Okay, sound engineers or whatever, who has been on the anti-wind side of things, and there is definitely certain sides for a long time. You listen to the whole thing. There's a little bit of it where he and, of course, the person doing the interview, so some talk radio thing somewhere, get a little snarky and make a few what I would consider ad hominem attacks against other researchers. But what is really interesting, if you, I gave everybody a copy except I don't have enough. I gotta make one more for somebody. At 56 minutes and 20 seconds to 57 minutes and 16 seconds, he made some comments and claims. At that point, he says that people in rural areas can hear things for miles. I find that somewhat dubious or rare at best. There are times when you can hear things a long ways off. He's claiming you could hear a car pulling up to a stop sign 2 miles away. Might happen maybe once in I'm not sure when. I don't know if I've ever heard a car 2 miles away.
Excuse me, can I make one point while you're making that? Look up in Vermont where people complain 3.5 miles away. I'll send you the reference if you need it.
Yeah.
You send it through to Debbie and she'll send it out.
But we're talking about a car isn't that loud. Hearing a car 2 miles away and claiming he can tell when it stopped at the stop sign which direction it's going.
Well,
Whether
these
it's
people, 3.5 miles, they couldn't see the wind turbines. And it wasn't just one
But
person.
a wind turbine is a lot louder than a car. Again, I'm just saying some of his comments I found a little dubious. But here, there's also a lot of good information. And at 59:07 to about 1 minute 1 and 34 seconds, Mr. James makes his recommendations for sound limits outside of residences, although he happens to personally believe that the entire property should be considered a residence. But his recommendation outside of residence is 35 dBA, the same one that we have voted to adopt, and from 50 to 55 dBc. He first says 50 to 55, then he fudges a little later and goes 50.
So where are we on DVC on the new rules?
We haven't set new rules, but I was actually leaning towards the 55.
55.
And here's the thing about DBC, and again, I'll get into that in the next part. But what's very interesting is this is one of the people who is a primary opponent of wind farms, and he's recommending the limits that we're recommending.
And the third thing he recommended? At
The
that
third
same
thing
point?
is, and we will get into that, on low frequency sound, but there are some problems with that which we will get into.
That he did recommend a third standard.
He did, but he didn't come up with an actual
Right.
standard
What was
because
the third thing?
the infrasound.
How did he recommend that you do it?
Well, it's sort of, the problem is there still hasn't been enough studies. he's tending to lean towards, but again, remember, this is someone who's strongly on that side, he's leaning towards a 60 dB, I'm not sure.
Maybe G, isn't G?
Well, that's
It
just
was
it.
unclear, I couldn't hear what he.
He isn't even sure, that's the problem here.
I don't think anyone is. but-
Yeah, that is the thing, yeah, but we'll get into that. But I found that kind of interesting, that he's recommending pretty much what we're recommending. And he is considered one of the really strong precautionary principle acousticians. Okay, then, Peter said the LNF standard and the CLUO worked. It protected residents from the negative effects of LNF, low frequency noise. Why would the planning board want to change it? Well, here's where the problem is. It turns out, and that study that you found pointed it out, that using a DBC reference, if the infrasound is really a problem, does nothing to protect people. Because DBC doesn't measure the low frequencies either. So what it amounts to is the present LUO standard is not based on sound science, but was based on what is now discredited criteria originally written to address noise from gas turbine power plants. And in fact, the study that Bill found, they have a graph showing first DBG, why it's a lousy measure, because it rounds off the low frequencies. And second, they put both a gas-fired, gas turbine sound spectrum and a wind turbine sound spectrum on the same graph. Well, the DBG actually would do a pretty good job of helping you with a gas turbine because it's peaked in about that same area. Doesn't do a thing to wind turbines.
So they keep the wind turbine keeps going up, right?
The wind turbine goes up fairly steady, the gas turbine has this big hump.
The hump and drops down, I remember that picture.
Yeah. So what it amounts to is the present LUO standard for DBC
Doesn't really protect.
doesn't really protect. It's based on old ideas that are now discredited by just about everybody. If you're going to have a standard for DBC, and it is recommended in that report that you had, was a fixed level like 50 or 55. They were recommending 55, I think, in that report, with the idea that this protects people from that rumbling sound that you will get with primarily low frequency audible. It still doesn't do a thing for this so-called inaudible.
All right, what else?
Well, my last thing was, I thought the last comment was your consultant, David Hessler, has always been a wind industry consultant. His handling of the job reviewing the RSE study was really bad, and in his professional work, he represents wind developers. My comment to that is, we understand you disagree with Hessler's review, but we feel an ad hominem attack on Mr. Hessler's professionalism is inappropriate.
No, I tend to agree. I mean, first of all, he didn't do a really bad review of it.
What's that?
Right, it's
Because
he
he-
didn't agree with it is what was bad about it. So,
I mean, we could, because even the Shirley report has it listed right at the beginning, very honestly, that that, for instance, David Hessler is often employed by various wind developers, and then Robert Rand, who I do know but Peter likes, is almost exclusively employed by people fighting wind farms.
And we didn't go out intentionally looking for someone.
No, we put out an RFP and the guy was from away. I never heard of the guy before.
No,
So, I would just well leave it at that, but I
Well,
did
the other thing
feel
that's
that-
interesting, though, I think, is that all those people that, the firm from Channel Islands, Hessler, and Rand, and then there was a fourth firm from I forget where. But anyway, they apparently must have some mutual respect for each other because they got together and did that study together in Wisconsin, which I thought was pretty interesting.
It's a very good study.
Right, I mean, and, you know, it addressed a lot of issues, and so, you know, I can't help but think that if he was that bad, that, you know, considering how Rand is, like you said, pretty much of the consultant of choice for, you know, people who oppose the project, they probably wouldn't have worked together if they really thought that they were that bad.
Well, no,
They just-
they were all being professional.
Well, right, exactly, that's the
Not
point.
only that, but you had 5 people that were monitoring and listening to, at different sites, and typically, whether it was the 1,200, the 3,500, or the 7,000 foot, 4 out of 5 basically agreed on what they heard at every level except for Robert Rand. He was out of step on every one of them.
Well, but there is a lot of information in that report, and if you look down through, start looking through all the different sound graphs, it's really interesting. But you gotta do some digging.
Right,
I recommend putting it on a computer, and because they put too many sound graphs in one page, you gotta blow it up to 200%.
yeah, I know, I agree with you, it was that, I had a tough time reading that, but I thought it was interesting. I like that they all worked together on doing that project.
One of the things that was interesting on a lot of those graphs, if you take a look at them, the sound outside went like this, and then it went, at the very end, it went down. Yet the sound inside kept going up at the end, at the lowest frequencies. And the thought there is, okay.
Well, the sound waves are so wide, so,
Well, the problem
Yeah, or
is
the
how much of that is not due to the turbines. If your turbine sound is actually
oh, I see.
going down, is there a source of sound inside the house or some other source?
Well, the one couple did go into the basement though and said that they got relief, the
Yeah.
1,200 foot people.
Yes. There is some, now, if you go into the study that Bill found, which is really, really good, they point out why the DBG is inappropriate. Then they get into the fact that if you're going to set a really low frequency limit, it's probably going to have to be a fixed limit, and it's going to have to be unweighted completely. And one of the problems at this point is that most of the test instruments are questionable at those low frequencies that they're concerned about.
All right, kind of bring it to an end here because I gotta go home and.
So we've got to look more at that.
So this is what I did on the notes, okay, on that page with all the links on it. I went back through it and I tried to connect the dots so that people could see where the information was coming from. So, you know, for example, I figured out that I could make these like little folders. So now like this link is one that Bill presented. And then here's the stuff that Bruce did. And then here's some links that I came up with. And here's some stuff from Maine government. That obviously, well, that's actually Maine government, that's fairly new. And then there's some stuff from towns that we had downloaded before. Though I wonder on my computer why it said it had the old dates on that stuff. Huh. Isn't this weird?
Yeah, put the date when you put it on.
Yeah, it did. The other day, it all said like the 2009 stuff in there. Wonder why that changed. Oh well. Well, anyway, some of that stuff is old, and then there's the stuff that's not otherwise filed. I was so happy that it had all the old dates that you could tell that it was the old stuff. So now I don't know why the old dates aren't there. Oh well. I got Googled.
Act.
So anyway, so I just thought it was easier for people to be able to track through it that way, and we have conversations and stuff. And so, if anybody else sends me any links, you know, I'll put it. And Paul, if you send a link to Debbie or whatever, I'm gonna stick your name up there too. If you send a link to Debbie, I'll put your name up there too. You'll be in lights again on the internet.
So instead of what I sent today,
I didn't get anything today. Did you send something today?
yeah, a whole bunch of stuff. She emailed me back that she'd sent it to you, so,
I didn't get it.
okay.
I don't know how late it was.
What?
Oh, you know what? You know what? She probably sent it because I was in a meeting all afternoon and I left straight from the meeting to come here because the meeting ran so late. So she might have done it.
One bunch is about public safety, and one bunch is about, oh God, what a day I Something else.
Okay,
Setbacks.
okay, all right, I'm sorry I didn't get, I'll try to get that stuff up and posted.
And then I left one out of each, so there's a third
There's a no sheet or
email
what?
that's
Oh,
got one
yes.
supposed to be
All right, I'll look at it probably tomorrow,
Mhm.
so,
background stuff.
And Paula, when it comes to hearing things long distance, I can tell you that there have been times for my property, extremely rare, I'm talking about maybe 3 or 4 times in several years, when, back when the paper mill in Old Town was running,
You see that?
you could hear it.
Yeah.
But this is like, yeah, once in a while you can hear things from several miles away, but the conditions have got to be so perfect. Absolutely still air between here and there, usually on cold, cold winter nights. The conditions are so rare, but yeah, it happens, you can hear things, but it's not like, oh, every day you can hear it.
But you can hear some of the larger jets
Yeah.
taking off around 4 a.m. in the morning when they're going on a mission, and that's 20 to 25 miles. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's also, let's see,
Also
it's a jet, it's
yeah.
letting about
Yeah.
130 to 140. You're talking about the Air Force ones, I'm assuming this, the KC-135s of the old engines.
yeah, the E-models.
Yeah,
The R models, I'm
Also
pretty sure you don't
trains
hear those.
carry along
Yeah.
with
But the dB is pretty high on those.
I hear it, but I can see Bangor Air, I mean, I can see the lights,
yeah.
that.
and I can,
Yeah.
hear the, jets taking
The
off.
thrust when they big.
They're not all jets.
No. Just a couple
Yeah,
nights ago.
those older ones, those,
I didn't think, I thought they converted all their
The R models, but the thing is, you're hearing them up in the air.
Yeah.
You're not hearing them like
Well,
when
when
they
they
launch.
did it, when they're,
It's kind of like a takeoff roll to me.
yeah, they did, just a couple nights
Really?
ago.
Yeah.
It was around
You
3
You
or
heard
4
a takeoff roll?
you can hear the difference
Well, I would
between
say
those
three roll,
ones.
it was one of
Well, you
the
know what,
great
they're not
times.
always, we have a lot of transient aircraft in there.
Yeah.
You can hear a takeoff roll occasionally. It's like, say, Russian cold, clear.
Yeah, they're the Russian jets. Thanks for,
Hey, if you
And
know,
smells.
you're gone next week?
no, the week after.
Or the week
We
after?
disconnected.
We won't have anybody the week we're gone. We won't be talking. The people can't.
Put one of these in my
How much
bag
snow do we
one
get?
day and.
Is that snow?
Well, I heard the plow go by.
Is that
No, you can't have the bag.